Racism can feel like an overwhelming issue, but what if the solution started with something simple, something you can do today? Let's dive into the small, everyday actions that lead to real, lasting change. Now, let's break down each of the small acts that, when done consistently, can make a real difference in combating racism. We'll explore why these actions matter, provide real-life examples, and highlight practical ways to incorporate them into your daily life. 1. Educate yourself and others. Understanding is key. One of the most important steps in the fight against racism is education. It's not enough to just acknowledge that racism exists. You need to understand its roots, its current impact, and the role each of us plays in perpetuating or dismantling it. What it is? Reading books, watching documentaries, listening to podcasts, and following influencers or thought leaders who share insights on racial justice can help you develop a deeper understanding of racism. Delve into works written by Black, Indigenous, and people of color, BIPOC authors to gain perspectives that you may not have considered before. Why it makes a difference. Awareness is the first step toward change. When you understand the history and systemic nature of racism, you begin to recognize how it operates in your own life, community, and society at large. Sharing what you've learned with others, especially in your social circles, can create a ripple effect of awareness, inspiring more people to engage with the issue. Actionable steps. Set aside time each week to read or listen to something about racism or racial justice. Share what you learn in casual conversations or on social media, ensuring the voices you amplify are from marginalized communities. Real-life example. Many individuals have shared how reading books like The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander or watching 13th, the documentary by Ava DuVernay shifted their understanding of the justice system and racial inequalities. 2. Call out microaggressions. Stand up for others. Microaggressions are subtle but harmful comments or behaviors that reinforce stereotypes or racial biases, often unintentionally. These might seem small or insignificant, but they add up over time, leaving marginalized groups feeling invalidated or less than what it is. Microaggressions could be a joke about someone's race, questioning where someone is really from, or assuming a person is less educated because of their background. Calling out microaggressions involves politely and firmly pointing out when these types of comments or behaviors occur. Why it makes a difference. Microaggressions accumulate over time, and a simple, respectful intervention can make people stop and think about the harm they're causing. When you call out microaggressions, you also normalize confronting them in everyday life, encouraging others to do the same. Actionable steps. Practice how to speak up without being confrontational. For example, you can say, "Hey, that comment could come across as offensive. Let's rephrase that." If you feel comfortable, share resources or articles that explain why certain comments or behaviors are harmful. Real-life example. One woman shared that when a colleague at work made an offhand comment about a black person not fitting the stereotype, she calmly asked, "What do you mean by that?" This led to a productive conversation about racial stereotypes in the workplace. 3. Amplify. Marginalized voices. Give them a platform. Racism often thrives in environments where certain voices are silenced or ignored. By amplifying marginalized voices, whether through social media, personal recommendations, or public support, we begin to break down the structural barriers that keep them out of sight. What it is: supporting Black-owned businesses, sharing the work of BIPOC artists, and promoting content created by marginalized groups is an essential way to fight racism. In professional or social contexts, make sure diverse voices are included in discussions, projects, and decisions. Why it makes a difference. Visibility is crucial. The more diverse voices we hear, the more we understand their experiences and the less likely we are to rely on stereotypes. By sharing, supporting, or elevating the voices of marginalized groups, you're directly contributing to a more inclusive society. Actionable steps. Share a post on social media every week that highlights a BIPOC creator, organization, or business. Attend events or support organizations led by people of color to show your commitment to diverse voices. Real-life example. A popular YouTuber regularly promotes smaller, minority-owned YouTube channels that focus on racial justice topics. By doing so, she not only supports other creators but also introduces her predominantly white audience to new perspectives. 4. Practice. Active listening. Validate experiences. Racism often goes unaddressed because we don't always listen to the lived experiences of marginalized groups. Active listening is the key to understanding and validation. What it is: active listening means being fully present when someone shares their experience, asking questions to understand better, and validating their emotions. Avoid offering solutions or dismissing feelings. Instead, focus on listening without judgment. Why it makes a difference. When people feel heard, it builds trust and shows that their experiences matter. Listening is often the first step toward real understanding. This simple act of empathy can also inspire others to engage in deeper conversations about race. Actionable steps. When a friend or colleague, shares a story of racism they've encountered. Resist the urge to immediately offer advice or fix the situation. Instead, say, "I hear you, and I'm so sorry you had to experience that." Encourage others to share their thoughts and feelings, especially when they are from marginalized communities. Real-life example: after a Black employee shared their struggles with microaggressions at work, a manager responded by actively listening, which allowed the employee to feel validated and empowered to have a productive conversation about workplace diversity. 5. Speak up against racism even when it's uncomfortable. It's easy to remain silent when we hear racist remarks or see discriminatory actions. But silence can perpetuate racism. Speaking up even if it's uncomfortable is necessary to create change. What it is, this doesn't mean going into battle mode every time you witness racism. But it can be as simple as saying, "That's not appropriate," or "Can we not make that kind of joke?" Speaking up can also involve confronting a friend or family member about their biased comments or helping to educate others on what racism looks like. Why it makes a difference. Silence implies acceptance. When you speak up, it sets a precedent that racism won't be tolerated in your space. Over time, this will build a culture of accountability, making it harder for racist behaviors to persist unchecked. Actionable steps. The next time you hear a racial slur or offensive comment, challenge it directly. For example, "That comment makes me uncomfortable because it reinforces harmful stereotypes." In group settings, make it a point to stand up when someone is being excluded or stereotyped based on their race. Real-life example: a high school student shared how she stood up against racist comments in class. Even though she was nervous, afterward, several classmates approached her, expressing gratitude for her courage and telling her they'd never heard anyone challenge such comments before. 6. Support diversity in media and entertainment. Choose to support inclusion. One of the most influential ways to combat racism is by being intentional about what you watch and read. By supporting diverse creators, we help dismantle harmful stereotypes and promote inclusion. As we come to the end of this video, I want you to take a moment, just a small one, to really sit with everything we've talked about today. Because here's the truth: fighting racism isn't a single act, a single march, a single conversation, or a single moment of courage. It's a collection of moments, a collection of choices, a collection of small, everyday decisions that shape the world far more than we often realize. Every time you question a stereotype, every time you speak up when silence would have been easier, every time you choose to learn instead of looking away, every time you show kindness to someone who has been treated unfairly, every one of those moments matters. Sometimes we imagine change as something huge, something larger than life, something reserved for leaders or activists or people on big stages. But the truth is, real change often begins in the quietest places, in our homes, in our friendships, in our habits, and in our hearts. It happens in conversations that no one else hears. It happens in decisions that no one else sees. It happens in how we treat people when there's nothing to gain, and it happens when we choose, again and again, not to let racism go unchallenged. Because fighting racism isn't about being perfect. It isn't about saying the right thing every time or having all the answers. It's about showing up. It's about trying. It's about caring enough to do the small things, knowing that those small things add up. You may never see the full impact of your actions. You may never know whose heart you softened, whose perspective you changed, whose pain you eased, or whose hope you helped rebuild. But I promise you this: every small act creates a ripple. And when enough of us create enough ripples, they become waves. So if you've ever felt powerless in the face of racism, if you've ever wondered, "What can I really do?" remember this video. Remember that change doesn't start with grand gestures. It starts with small acts. Small acts that build into patterns. Patterns that become culture. Culture that becomes change. And you are part of that change.